All right, Chapter 7, Neurons, the matter of the mind. In this topic, in this chapter, we're going to be covering cells of the nervous system, structure of the neurons, nerve impulses, and synaptic transmission. We're going to start off with just an overview of the nervous system. The nervous system is responsible for integrating and coordinating all of the body's activities, and it can be broken down into two main divisions. The central nervous system, which is going to fall down the center line of the body, the brain, the spinal cord, and fall down the center of the body line, so the brain and the spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system, which includes all of the nervous tissue throughout the body that is not brain and spinal cord. So anything that's not brain and spinal cord is the peripheral nervous system. The composition of these systems, both of these systems, are going to be ultimately composed of two types of cells, specifically neurons, which are going to be our nerve cells that are responsible for generating and transmitting the message, and the neuroglia. Neuroglia cells, you may also hear them referred to as glial cells. Their primary goal is going to be to support and protect the nerve cells. Though they can be broken down and described by their specific functions, some provide structural support to the neurons of the central nervous system. Some will provide the neurons with nerve growth factors, a steady stream of chemicals that help stimulate nerve growth. Some will form a protective sheath around different portions of the nerve cell. All of them are going to have ultimately the goal of supporting the neurons. And because of this, because their primary goal is support, they actually are going to outnumber the neurons by 10 to 1. We have way more glial cells than anything else. So we're going to start off by looking at neurons themselves. There are going to be three categories of neurons, three specific categories that we use to classify and describe the different types of neurons. The first type is going to be the sensory neurons, or afferent neurons. These are going to be responsible for conducting information toward the brain and the spinal cord. So where do you suppose they come from? Their ultimate goal is going to be carrying information towards the central nervous system. Where are they coming from? What kind of information are they transmitting? There you go. That's an opportunity for you to respond. If you didn't, they're typically coming from sensory receptors. They are taking sensory information towards the brain. So they'll be picking up signals from your fingertips. They'll be picking up signals from your eyes or from your ears or your nose or any sensory organ, and they're going to be sending that sensory information to the brain to be processed. Since they're since they are sending that information, they're going to carry them along the motor neurons. Motor neurons are going to be efferent neurons. Motor neurons or efferent neurons are carrying information away from the brain and spinal cord. So what kind of information needs to be carried away from the brain? Where is this information going? What does this information contain? Primarily, it's going to be containing information to an effector, muscles or glands that need to respond to changes from the brain. So your finger reaches out, your sensory afferent neurons touch, a candle and go, oh, that's hot. They carry that information to the brain. The brain goes, oh, that's hot. Let's not touch that anymore. Let's pull our finger away from that. And they send that information down your motor neurons to your finger and cause your finger to draw back. Now, obviously, this information exchange happens very, very, very quickly. You'll pull back from a flame almost as soon as you touch it. But this is the pathway that it has to travel. The information travels from your sensory afferent neurons all the way up to your motor or efferent neurons, or up to the brain and then back down through the motor or efferent neurons. Now, typically, they're going to travel along what are known as interneurons or association neurons. Interneurons are association neurons. They're typically located along the central nervous system between sensory and motor neurons. They're going to help integrate and interpret sensory signals. These are going to be the most common neurons of the nervous system. They account for almost 99% of the neurons in your body. Very few of your neurons are actually responsible for picking up information or affecting information. Most of your neurons are responsible for just transmitting information, passing the message along from your fingertip all the way up to your brain. So they're going to be found in the brain and the spinal cord between sensory and motor neurons. They're going to integrate and interpret sensory signals. A homeostatic imbalance that can affect this particular system would be ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a progressive disease that targets motor neurons specifically. So the motor neurons die off and they stop sending messages to muscles from the brain. So unfortunately, the sensory and interneurons are not affected by this disorder. So you can still feel everything. You can still pass messages back and forth. It's just the message doesn't get received by the motor neuron, so cannot affect any change. So awareness and reasoning still remain completely intact until this disease progresses towards respiratory failure. It's a very hard and heartbreaking disorder, homeostatic imbalance of this particular system. Here is that sort of effector loop, or sensory neuron loop. The sensory receptor for pain receives the information, passes that information along interneurons. Interneurons are going to pass that information to the brain. The brain is going to process that information, send a signal back along through interneurons, telling your motor neurons, hey, pull your finger back. That's hot, stupid. Until the message gets received. And that is going to be an overview of our neurons and their pathways.